These three AI implementation mistakes are happening all the time. Whether you're deploying AI for a customer or doing it internally for your business, pay attention to these three tips because I swear it's going to help with any AI implementation that you do. Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the three biggest AI implementation mistakes and how we can avoid them going forward. So on the screen here, you're going to see a number, and that's 80%. So this was pulled from a study, and this is the failure rate of AI implementations at this point. Um, Vast majority of AI implementations are failing for whatever reason. I think I've narrowed it down to three-ish big issues that I've seen and I've personally ran into. We're going to cover those and talk a bit about how we can actually go and avoid those just to make sure that we're actually deploying these AI systems and the customer is getting value from them. So first thing I want to talk about here is the ROI. So the return on investment, for those of you who are not familiar, this is, what am I getting back when I'm investing this money into new tech? So a lot of customers, this should be the first thing that we put in front of them. This is the way that you describe your value and change these conversations from how much does it cost to how much am I saving? So that's the headline here. We need to describe to them, what they're actually saving by implementing AI. And the important thing is that once we're identifying some of these processes and the ROI that these customers and groups are expecting from the AI, that allows us to actually implement systems that are useful and saving time. So a lot of the times we're seeing implementations that are something like, it drafts emails or something very basic that doesn't really save a lot of time for people. So that's a huge part of the process is we have to go in and identify exactly what processes are taking up so much time that we could implement a simple AI system to replace it. So best way to walk through this is going through a bit of an example. So let's say we have a customer that's coming to us. So we have Mr. Customer. Okay. And they have three main issues that they want to resolve with AI. So we're taking a look at these issues, and we're going to have to dig into them a little bit. But upon like initial questioning, we find the following. So we find that the quarterly report. So this is something that they're producing, and asking them, about how much time it takes them to actually go and create this report. Well, somebody says, it takes about 24 hours worth of work to put together a quarterly report. So what's the math on that? Well, it's 24 hours, right? And then every 3 months. So what do we get? We get roughly 8 hours a month, which is our effort on this particular item. So I've got an ROI calculator that's going to go and do some of the assessment for us and make our decision really easy on what we want to implement and make it easy for the customer on what they need to implement. And we're just going to plug in the hours based on month. So next up, they also identify that they need help with lead qualification and follow-up. This one, anytime I hear something replacing sales in a business, I think there's huge value in it. The famous quote, sales is the lifeblood of a business. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business. So anytime there's, AI around sales, I think there's really high value in it. In this example, they've identified that they have two sales reps who are spending roughly 30 hours a month each doing lead qualification and follow-up. So that is a lot of time spent doing something. It's not necessarily manual. It's them, sending emails, following up, updating their funnel, things like that. But they've identified, that two different sales reps both spend 30 hours a month doing this work. So that comes out to, of course, our grand total of 60 hours. And then the third point, the customer comes to us and says, we need help formulating our PowerPoint templates. We want to be able to kind of, plug in a prompt and get some output based on the templates that we have. So a great requirement. Again, we need to ask them how much time is this really going to save them? How much time are they spending on PowerPoint templates at this point? So, they note again that it takes about 8 hours a month of a junior resource to go and formulate their templates before they're going and doing their presentations. So that one's simple, 8 hours a month, right? And keep in mind, this is a junior resource. So what do I do from here? So scrolling down, I have my ROI calculator. So the ROI calculator is going to be available in the Skool community that we have. Also, just comment if you want it. I'll send it to you, no problem. But basically what it is it allows us to list out the different requirements that we surface. as processes. So we have our lead qualification and follow up. We have our quarterly report, and we have our internal PowerPoint templates. So, what we need to do is we need to fill in some values here. So, our monthly hours spent. So, that's what we've just talked about. This is identified with the customer on those initial calls. We have 60 hours for our lead and qualification, and we have 8 hours for our quarterly report, and we have 8 hours for our PowerPoint templates. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting and sometimes involves a little bit of guesswork unless we're comfortable asking whoever we're working with what the rate is that the resource is that's completing the task. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you just take an average hourly cost, so lots of times we can just Google what the going rate is for somebody like a sales rep in a particular industry, and we can find that hourly cost and plug it in just to get an idea around some of the numbers. So here, I've put in $55 an hour for the sales reps that are doing the follow up and lead qualification. $50 an hour for the person that's going and putting together the quarterly report, and then $30 an hour for the more junior resource that's doing some of the PowerPoint templates. Now, percent automatable, this is something that I've kind of plugged in here and came up with to some extent. But this is how much I think we can automate the process. So this first one would be 90%. If it's follow up and lead qualification, those are things that AI can handle, especially on the follow up side of things, right? If we're sending emails, if we're sending text messages, that can all be done by AI at this point. So there's a lot of automatable items in this process. And I think that, 10% oversight by the sales rep is probably plenty. So I'm saying 90% of the time will be eliminated and handed off to AI. Next up, we have 80%, and 80% I've identified for the presentations. I find there's not a great solution out there for presentation mock-ups that I'm aware of quite yet. But there is a lot more oversight that needs to happen, a lot of tweaks that need to happen in presentations when people are getting ready to present to a certain group. So a little bit more time that's manual in those processes. So scrolling over, we have our implementation cost. So this is an estimate based on hours. How long do you think it's actually going to take to go and implement a system that covers something like automating follow-up messages, right? So you'll see here that I've put $10,000 for the implementation cost for the lead qualification and follow-up, $5,000 for the quarterly report, and then $2,500 to help them with their PowerPoint templates. Here, I've plugged in my ongoing monthly costs. So, of course, this can vary again, and we need to be really sharp around, how much time we're allotting for them going forward. If it's a bigger system that's going to need more support, this number needs to go up, right? Because they're going to need the support. So our ongoing monthly costs here for the lead qualification agent would be $400, and then $200 for our report, and $150 for our templates. So that's kind of our retainer, our ongoing fees. I'll talk a bit about it later, but it does add some value from both their side and from our side. Now, the monthly hours saved, this is where we get into the calculation side of things. So as soon as I'm done plugging in all my numbers, it's going to tell me exactly how many hours they're saving a month. So in this case, we can see the lead qualification is 54, and then we only have, just over 6 hours for the other two. It's also going to talk about monthly cost savings. So here they're saving almost $3,000 a month if they're to implement this lead qualification and follow-up system. And then for the presentations, it's, $320, $192. So not very much, right? And then we have our annual cost savings. So this is where it really jumps out to them on the paper, these next couple columns. So there's $35,000 a year in annual cost savings by estimate, $3,800 for the quarterly report, and $2,300 for the PowerPoint templates. And then net savings after 1 year. So this is including our costs, right? So this is what they're saving in total. This is $20,840. So a massive amount. And then what you'll notice after is that they actually aren't saving any money if we're implementing the other two systems, right? This is why it's so important to do an ROI calculation on these processes, because we're not providing value, and this implementation will fail if they don't see value from it, right? And especially if we're looking at this last column here, the payback. So this is how many months will it take for this system to pay for itself, basically. And for the sales site, the sales agent, it's going to be about 5 months, right? And then for the other two, it's almost 2 years. By then, templates are going to change, things are going to change, right? So these are examples of areas that we should not be targeting. we should be steering clear of, right? Because there's no value there for the customer. If they're spending money and not saving money, then why would they spend money? It makes no sense. Anyway, that's my ROI calculator. Again, it's in the Skool community. I'll plug it to you if you want to comment on the post. I'm fine to send that across, but I use it, we for every single implementation that we're doing. It's so important to have and just to be able to realize the value, and it's going to help you in the sales process immensely, right? People know what they're buying, they know what they're saving. It really changes that mindset from okay, how much am I going to pay these guys, into okay, how much are they going to save me? Okay, item number 2 here is processes and systems. This is really important as well. So, what I generally do is calculate your return on investment. This is all part of the very early days sales side of things. But one thing that I see a lot in failed AI implementations is people not being able to identify a process to replace, right? So, in our previous example, if we're talking lead and qualification, and they don't have a certain follow up system that they're currently using, then it's going to fail, right? Like, what are we building it for? It's like a plane without a destination, and you put it on autopilot. It's going to go, but who knows where it's going? So it's really important to map this out with them. This is something that's so important in any AI implementation, whether you're doing it internal within your business or you're targeting a customer. You need to help them identify processes, or you need to do it yourself. So in the sales example, right? If we're doing a follow up system, we need something like, okay, after 2 minutes of, let's say, like a web form being filled out, we're sending a follow up, and then after 1 hour, we're going to give them a call, and then after 2 days, if we hear nothing, we're going to send them an email, and on and on. You get my drift. They need to walk along this process in order for us to be able to automate it, right? So this is something that you have to sit down with the sales reps, talk to them, see if there's some structure that they're working on. If there's not, help them formulate that structure, even if it's something as high level as this. After 2 minutes, we're sending an email. After an hour, we're sending a text. After 2 days, we're sending another email, just so that you have actual targets to hit with your AI agent and some structure around it so that you can go and build it and deploy it and people are happy with it and you can track it against metrics, all of that stuff, right? Once we've actually identified the process, one last thing we need to do and we need to make sure of is that there are systems in place that support it. What I mean by this is the organization that I'm working with, do they all have the same email provider? Like, are we on Outlook? Are we on Gmail? What are we on? Right? Do they have something like, in this case, a CRM for sales? Right? We need a place that we can track these communications where they can go in and see what the AI has sent these users. If they're something finance, do they have an ERP system? Track invoices and things like that. It's so important for us to try and help these organizations identify what they need to do as a next step system wise if they haven't already, right? If they do not have systems in place, this AI is going to be just, wandering about and sending emails and CCing people, and it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. They need to have the structure in place. They need to have the process. They need to have the systems in order for us to go and actually do what AI does best, and that's automate, right? Okay, my final topic is an adoption plan. So this is something, again, that's super rare to see at these stages, whether it's, everybody's just so new to these AI tools and they're not necessarily used to implementing things like this, but you need to have an adoption plan, okay? And what that means is you need to educate people on what is happening behind the scenes. So people need to be aware of a sales agent that's coming in and taking their follow-ups, right? They need to know how it works. And the best way to do that is to involve them in the process, right? Mapping out the process like we did in the previous step, and then having them go and monitor it while we're kind of working through testing and working on deployment so they're aware. Otherwise, this AI is just going to run and do its own thing. The salesperson's going to run and do its own thing, and you're not saving time, and there's not going to be that ROI point, right? That ROI point's going to be missing because, we're overlapping and we're doing all sorts of things. So we need to make sure that people are aware of the systems that are happening behind the scenes. Another point in user adoption that absolutely is a non-negotiable is UAT, so user acceptance testing. When we're initially rolling these out, ideally it's in a testing capacity, some sort of sandbox where we're deploying these agents and we're letting them run against, dummy data, test data, and we're allowing whether it's, in this case, the sales rep to monitor the information that it's sending out because it's really, really important that we're not just going and implementing something because there might be changes that are needed or it's not exactly formatted right, which causes a huge, huge gap in adoption in these things, right? That's why we're hitting those high numbers of 80% failure across the board for AI implementations. We need to be able to, be a little bit flexible when we deploy, we test it, we identify if there's any little tweaks that need to happen, and that's through the user, right? Nobody knows it better than the person that was doing the job previously. So that's vital for us to know. Okay, and then once we're done our user acceptance testing, we're going to move into our kind of support period. So this is once we're actually live with the systems, right? But one thing I really want to emphasize: proactive support. If we have somebody on a monthly retainer, it's our job to provide value for them, not for them to, come to us when they need us. We need to be front facing for a couple of different reasons, right? So we need to identify what's working, what's not. So are there any changes that are needed in the system? This is, huge value for both them and you because what they'll get is, they'll feel heard, as well as they'll get a system that works a little bit better for them. And then what you'll get is more work, right? So the 400 retainer isn't, it's not everything. If they come to you and they're like, oh, we want the follow up agent to also do X, we want it to do something else. That's when you can approach them and be like, okay, well, that's going to be an additional, $4,000 with an ROI of, you get my drift? Like it just adds so much value to both parties involved. And if you're not doing this, then, if you're kind of just hiding and waiting for your X amount of dollars to come in on your monthly retainer per month, it's going to stop at some point, right? Like people need to see value in what you're doing. And the best way to do that is to get in front of them, book your monthly call with them, review the agent, talk to them about what's happening. Is it working? Is it not? Do we need to take a different approach? Is there anything we want to add? It just adds so much value and, it allows these implementations to be successful because as with all business tech, like these things need to constantly evolve with the business. It's not, deploy it and forget about it for 10 years. You need to be on it and you need to be updating all the time. So those are my 3 biggest AI implementation mistakes that I'm seeing right now. If you guys enjoyed the video, please shoot me a subscription or a like. I appreciate it all. I'm a small channel right now, but going to be releasing new AI content every single week. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one.